What's going on, everybody? Sharpie360 here, and I spent a bunch of time building, breaking, and testing various rafts and mechanics to figure out how to make the ultimate raft in Stranded Deep. I got a list of my findings in tip form, so let's set sail. And if you find anything helpful in this video, feel free to hit the like button and possibly subscribe. Alright, let's get going. Tip number 1. Raft building materials do not increase or decrease performance. It really comes down to what you have available to you. The cheapest raft section that you can build is a tire raft base and then a plank raft floor, although you're more likely to come across buoy balls and scrap barrels. Tip number 2. Uneven raft sections can cause uneven buoyancy and partial submersion, so it's best to build as symmetrical as possible. For instance, if I were to place this raft section right here, you can see that it's starting to tip a bit, and then if I were to place another section onto it, you can see that it really starts to get off kilter here, so you want to try and build as symmetrical as possible. So I would want to put 2 sections out on this side to get it as symmetrical as possible. And the same thing goes for the back and the front as well. Tip number 3. Items such as sails, canopies, after a few hits, rudders, and anchors can all be destroyed using the hunting knife. And depending on your harvesting level, you'll get most of the material back. You can also use the hunting knife to destroy the motor, but one hit from any weapon will do that. See? Tip number 4. Raft platform and float sections, light hooks, and container shelves can be removed with the axe. The platforms and floats can also be repaired if damaged by using a hammer. For the light hook, you have to pick it up, and then you should be able to disassemble it. And for the container shelves, you'll have to take out any of the containers that are currently placed there. Tip number 5. Container shelves don't seem to have a sound effect or animation when you're hitting them to disassemble them. But about 6 hits will take them out, just like that. If you were to destroy the raft base and then the floor that the container shelf was on, then the container shelf will still be part of the raft. It'll glitch out. Tip number 6. Sails seem to work on a set speed. You can only go this fast, and adding more sails doesn't seem to increase the speed or acceleration to the max speed that you can go either. I tested multiple raft designs with sail configurations in between my custom island and my base. So I basically started from that island over there at the same spot, and I would basically start at this point, have the front of the raft lined up with the end of the dock here, and it would be over further if it was too big to fit in this section. And then we would start from here and go over towards that island there. And then I would end up at this point right here and end myself timed at that rock. And everything basically ran at the same time of about 2 minutes and 42 seconds, plus or minus 3 seconds here and there, depending on weather conditions and if I got hung up on a rock or something like that. But all in all, it was all about the same speed. Raft sails, additional sails did not make any difference whatsoever. So basically all you need is 1 raft sail and you're good to go. Tip number 7. Rafts have a right side up, and floor sections will always snap in this orientation. For instance, if I try to add this raft floor section to this float, you can see that it's snapping to the bottom and not to the top. It's upside down right now. So I just need to flip it over. Flip it over like that, and now I should be able to place it. Perfect, just like that. Tip number 8. Rafts cannot sink. They can be flipped over, however, and if your raft does flip, for whatever reason, you end up like this. The easiest way to flip it back over is to grab one end of it and try and swim underneath it. There you go. For larger rafts, if you manage to flip it over somehow, an easier way to flip these ones over is to grab it and you can swim down if you are out in the ocean. Swim down a bit ways and then just let it go and it'll slingshot it up. And typically it'll land right side up. I wish I was above water to see that thing fly up in the air, but yeah, that works too. Slingshot it out of the ocean. Tip number 9, and a bit of a correction to my tips videos, is that sharks can flip the raft over if it is small enough. I've only had it happen to this single section raft. I could imagine that it would happen to a 1x2, but I haven't had it happen with anything bigger than that. But if that were to happen, and say this shark, wherever he's swimming around at, were to flip me over. Come on, you can do it. It's pretty easy to maneuver past him, but if he does manage to flip this thing over... Nope. Okay, so he managed to flip it over. So if your raft does get capsized, you can get back onto the raft and stand up here, and I don't have any spears on me at the moment, but I would be able to fight that shark if I had enough on me, and then I could simply flip the raft back over after that fact. Another option is that you could just wait the shark out with the current of the ocean, because eventually you'll drift far enough where you'll be away from the shark and he won't try and chase you anymore. Tip number 10. The raft designs that I found to be most effective would be, for instance, this 4x3 for an all-around, or a 2x2 over there, or a 2x3 for better agility and turning, or more so a 5x5 raft for more of a mobile base type feel, which is what the USS Sharpness is. Rectangle raft shape is what I recommend building. Tip number 11. For more eccentric designs, I found that odd shapes significantly hinder the maneuverability of the raft. I tested some wide and long rafts, about 1x15 and 15x1, and it did not go well. The turning was the biggest challenge, and it also had a lot of balancing issues. These long, narrow ones with the raft sections like this 2x1 here is essentially just like being on a tightrope when it's out at sea. Yeah, see, it flips over immediately, so I do not recommend that. The narrowest I would recommend building, if it's not just a single raft section like this, is a 2x2. So for this 1x15, you can see that it goes in a relatively straight line, but it does not turn at all. So I can't use this. It's virtually unusable. And then for this 15x1, or the narrow one, it's like being on, or actually this is like a 10x1, but it's like being on a tightrope. It's too tedious to use, so no good. Tip number 12. If you want to build multiple rafts, you need to either build them all on the same island, or you can do what I did and build a transport raft. And this is Big Bertha. Big Bertha is an 8x5 open, massive open transport raft, basically a barge, and I use container shelves as makeshift walls to keep things on the inside, because these do have a little bit of collision, so it kind of acts as a little bit of a wall, but they're not the most reliable. Anyways, what I use this for is if I manage to build a raft on another island that I want, and I need to bring it back here, what I can do is bring Bertha here over to the island where that new raft is, drag the raft up onto here, and then set sail back to this main base island. I've gotten that guy, the expressway, on here, and then I also fit that single section raft over there on top of the expressway, on top of this, all getting back over here from about 2 islands away. The only thing to be careful about with this is the rough seas and storms will move the rafts around a little bit on you, so what I recommend doing before transporting a raft is to save or wait out until after a storm to transport it, just to be safe, because you don't want it moving around. The container shelves help a little bit, but I've had raft almost slide off the back here. Tip number 13. When transporting large items such as shark kills or smaller raft sections, you may start to see your raft begin to submerge a little bit in some areas. If that happens too much and your whole raft is underwater, then the rudder is pretty much going to be useless. And if you find yourself committed to that situation in the middle of the ocean, for instance, what I recommend doing is just getting off the raft, grabbing it, and swimming with it for a distance. And then if a shark is getting near you, get back on it and get to safety. And kind of repeat that process, get to the next closest island, and then reassess the situation from there. It will work like this, but for instance, when the whole raft is underwater, then the rudder won't. So keep that in mind. Weight matters with these larger objects on rafts. Tip number 14. Sails do not give you additional turning capability, and the placement of the sail itself seems to make no difference, although you can orientate the sails in 4 directions. So for instance, if I wanted to give Big Bertha more maneuverability, I can build some sails in different directions, facing different directions. So I want one here, can rotate it. Put one on this side. Alright. And then to cover all my bases, I can just put a reverse facing sail this right here. So if I were to take this out now, stuck on this boat, so I need to go that way. Let's use this sail. Look at that. Sweet. So let's see. I want to go straight ahead, and then I want to also go this way. Cool. Nice try, shark. So that is another way that you can maneuver larger rafts quite easily. Tip number 15. The boat motor is significantly faster than using the sails, but lacks turning capability on larger rafts significantly. This is a good way to get somewhere quickly and then switch over to the sail and the rudder for fine-tuned control. And then if you were to try and use the raft motor and a sail at the same time, the sail actually hinders the motor, so don't do that. And this is a perfect example of using the rudder to turn instead of the motor because it just is too slow. You need to get over to that. But if I jump off that, jump on the rudder, drop a sail. The rudder turns a lot better for larger rafts than the motor does. Big time. Tip number 16. Alongside with what I was saying about the rafts moving around a little bit out at sea when they're on another raft like this, freestanding items such as the chest will also do that in rough seas. Items themselves that don't roll, like this hammer, tend to stay in place a lot easier than the chests or rollable items would, but it's not a guarantee. The best bet is to use a container shelf. And if all of your container shelves are full, what you can do is place one of these chests next to it. You see what I'm saying? The container shelves have collision, so this will kind of prevent it from sliding off that direction. So it's not a guarantee, but it will help if you're in a pickle, or if you have an extra chest and you don't have a slot for it. Tip number 17. As I mentioned in my 30 more tips videos, you can give yourself reverse by placing a sail in the opposite direction of which you sail your raft typically. Tip number 18. After hours and hours of in-game sailing on a single section raft during storms out there, I was unable to capsize the raft. This may be possible under the right circumstances, but very, very unlikely. Tip number 19. Ultimately, the rafts that will give you the best results are the ones that are a decent size, mid to large, have plenty of maneuverability for all situations, have plenty of storage and shade, and are stable enough to support large items such as barrels and container sections. Tip number 20. These are some of the rafts that I've designed over the course of researching this video, and if you follow the channel, you know that this is my main raft that I use throughout the campaign or story, the actual game. But if I would have had another choice to build early on, it probably would have been something more along this line. This raft is pretty neat because I have this open section right here, and the rudder gives me a better pivot point. This open section is actually pretty interesting too because I can place a raft float section in there and the rudder still works. So I don't know, that's kind of a glitch, but it helps you so you don't fall through. It's nice to fall through like this though because you can quickly get back up onto the raft if you're at speed out on the open water there. And then what I'll try to do when I'm laying out the actual utilities of the raft, such as the rudder and the anchor, I'll try to keep them all within reaching distance of when I'm actually on the rudder itself, so I can get the sails. I can't get the reverse sail, but that's okay. But I can also reach the anchor, and I'm also in the shade with the canopies as well, so that's nice with that. And then for the USS Sharpness, you can have probably seen already, but yeah, I have access to the raft anchors and the sails and underneath the canopy and the boat motor. So if I have one piece of advice to make your life a little bit easier through building a raft in Stranded Deep is try and build everything where you can reach everything at once. And really you just gotta experiment and play around with what works for you. One thing I can recommend doing is going into the cartographer and creating a custom island like I did over there with a bunch of materials on it so you can play around with all types of raft designs and not have to worry about finding all the material. Alright, so that's going to do it for this Stranded Deep raft tip video. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you guys checking this one out as well. If you found anything helpful in this, make sure to give the video a like. Subscribe if you haven't done so. If you're watching over here on Rumble, hit that like button. Smash the follow button as well. What do you guys think about the raft tips that I have for you today? And if you have any tips of your own, feel free to leave it in the comments section below because I'd love to check them out. I'm sure I missed a ton of different stuff. Thanks again for watching. That's gonna do it. And until next time, sharp out.